Hey everyone, Ekman here with another video, and we're here with the third week of the OP08 meta here in North America. I'm excited to go over the stats that we've gotten in the last couple of weeks as well, but I do want to mention too that this is kind of like the week before we have some really large tournaments here in both North America with Core TCG's online regionals, as well as Europe, which has a large Spain regionals as well. So we're going to get those results when we do this weekend as well. I'm looking forward to it, but this is kind of like the last week before we get some larger events to kind of look at how these decks do on a larger scale as well. But if you guys want to support the channel, please make sure to hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. I really do appreciate it, and it does help. And if you guys want any of the data that we're going over today, make sure to check out Eggman Events, which is linked in the description. And if you want even more data, make sure to check out TCG Matchmaking on their Patreon. If you support them on there, you get access to a higher caliber of data, some more like they just released this data and specifically based on that, but you can look at more filters and more decks and specifics. So I think that's really helpful too, and I really appreciate all they do. It is such such a blessing to be able to get so much data for this card game where otherwise I would not be able to. So we're going to jump into this. We're going to look at some just stats in general, some high ranking or high win rate deck list, and then kind of do an updated tier list at the end. But since I haven't really changed it all in the last 2 weeks, I want to kind of go over it. So we're going to start off though with the power rankings in general. So these are with people who are with higher MMR than usual. So at the beginning of this series, it was just kind of all of their data, but they've made sure to filter it for more of the higher end of the rank ladder too, which is really helpful. So from there, we have Rob Lucci with a 52.5 win rate. We have Stardeck 13 Luffy, Nami, Luffy, the purple one, Kalgara, and then Stardeck 14 Luffy and Reiju, all boosting a 50% or higher. And then from there, we also have Zoro, Bonnie, and then Katakuri with a little bit less at like a 49.9, 49.6, and 47.6 in general. So that's kind of an idea of what this looks like. We can also see how many matches they've recorded. So you can see that we have Rob Lucci and Stardeck 14 Luffy taking a large percentage of this. They have almost 10,000 matches, and those two leaders contribute to probably half of the matches in this top 10, right around there with how popular these decks are. So I think that's pretty open to see that they are very popular decks. Luffy is pretty close to Rob Lucci when it comes to win rate as well. It's like you do drop a couple points, but nothing too significant. And I would generally agree that like Rob Lucci, Stardeck 13 Luffy, and Nami have been just strong decks in general, pretty much since the end of OP 7.5 and into OP08. So and I think that's kind of part of the reason that these like some people aren't super excited with this meta because there hasn't been a lot of changes, and specifically as we'll see, the top placing deck list haven't really changed that much since 7.5. So I think that is a little bit unfortunate, but I do know we do get some changes at the end of the month too. So that's this data here, and if we look at the win rates, so again, this is just win rates across the board based on leader, and we do see that we do have a good amount of Rob Lucci. The only real bad matchup I think is still the black yellow Luffy, but the purple Luffy is also having a moderately successful matchup there too, and then Nami in the same way, so like a -1, like a 45-55 kind of matchup. And then Luffy does have like the black Luffy does have a better matchup into the black yellow Luffy, but it's a little bit worse than the Lucci. Nami's a little bit slower into it, and then there are some more aggressive builds, for example purple Luffy, purple blue Reiju, and Kalgara that are a little bit more aggressive, and then we do see like a 50-50 with Marco. But generally I think that these decks have some of the better matchups across the board there too. We do have the black yellow Luffy, which does have like some rough matchups still into Bonnie, but I think Bonnie's been doing a little bit worse than it has been. Also like Pudding and like some yellow decks too, but these aren't as present as much, so they're not as present just in the meta. We have Nami just having a generally standard win across the board. Biggest issues though are the more aggressive decks, so we do see Zoro's a really lackluster matchup for it. Purple Luffy's been doing pretty good, and then Reiju and Kalgara both being able to play bodies pretty quickly and be aggressive. Obviously Nami's having a bad time. So I would still say Zoro is probably like the more premier like aggressive deck for this format, but it does really stink against the black Luffy, the Rob Lucci, as well as the black yellow Luffy. But then after that, it does have a pretty good matchup spread across the board as well. Obviously purple Luffy's going to have a hard time when they're just going to be playing someone like you never want to use your leader ability, which kind of stinks. We have Bonnie having just a pretty abysmal matchup going into OP08 with Rob Lucci going down to like a 40%. which kind of stinks. Like this matchup, I don't think was this bad, but then it's just gone really, really bad with some of the inclusions that Rob Lucci's been able to add to it. Black Luffy kind of the same way, but a little bit more winnable. And then obviously the best thing about this is that we have a really good win rate against Black Hero Luffy and a evenish matchup against Nami as well. And then pretty much even plus across the board outside of Zoro, which can be a little bit tricky for you. Katakuri, it's just kind of you're always like a little bit -1, but nothing is too terrible. Nami's kind of tough for you and Zoro, so these two I think are harder than usual. Luffy, it seems like it's a bit rough too, but you do have some good spreads there too. Purple Luffy in general, though, I think is like one of the winners for when it comes to matchups. The only issue is that you have such a bad time against Zoro and the Katakuri. Like these are like abysmal win rates, right? 24%, 29%. The rest of these are okay-ish, but being able to, like, you do have some good matchups into the more popular decks in the format, so that's kind of the trade-off for you. Similar kind of thing for Reiji, you do have some okay matchups. Black Hero Luffy, though, is, again, pretty abysmal. Once they kind of start doing their 9K leader, you have a hard time interacting outside of just hoping that your pudding prevents them from doing any more plays with it. Zoro, the same thing, being a 4-life leader kind of stinks, and then Bonnie can kind of wall up against you. And lastly, Kalgara, we have an evenish matchup spread. The only issue is that Black Hero Luffy, kind of the same thing. 9K bodies are pretty hard to attack into with this leader, so being able to kind of press damage is tough for us. And then Bonnie, because they're able to kind of interact with their big bodies a little bit, and also Luigi can remove them. But you do have a moderately good matchup against the Star Deck 14 Luffy, and a good matchup spread across there, including stuff like Nami, which is nice. So it's been pretty popular there. So real quick, we are going to go over all the deck lists. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on some of them, especially because if we look at the top 3, we do know that like Rob Lucci, it hasn't really changed. I think the biggest change for this deck is that more people are on the Kaido, which I'm a big fan of this card. I thought that this was like a better card to kind of ramp up to later game. Since one, this can get rid of Moria pretty easily and make your opponent discard a card and a 9-drop 9K body. We can get rid of Moria because we can attack with leader, give it -1, and then use the Kaido. So that's great. So I do like that addition there. Star Deck 13 Luffy, it's been pretty much the same since, the OP07 came out. So there has been like the occasional, like, one of a Sabo, the finger pistol kind of thing, but we know what this deck looks like too. And then also Nami. This has not really changed since OP07. And even when it did change OP07, like the newest adds were the additions of like the Snake Dance, the Margariti, and the Boa. After that, there's not much changes. So I understand like why a lot of people are feeling like the fatigue of this meta, because I would say 50% of the room are likely these 3 decks. And they haven't really changed in a long time. So I understand that kind of sentiment for it. So they're still really strong, and I don't think there's, it's not like a tier 0 format, and there are some better, some decks that have chances right now. But I also do recognize that like there's a lot of like, a lot of people are dunking on Moria as being a really strong contender in this game. I mean, since release, right? It's always been a broken card, right? And I think people are feeling more of the fatigue right now, especially with Red Purple Law being out of this meta. So I'll maybe make a video going over this card in more specifics, maybe for closer to like a restriction list kind of thing. It's kind of tricky when we know that we're going to change the meta up by the end of this month anyways, that it's not really worth, campaigning or making these kind of videos. But in case you want my quick thoughts, I do think that this should be limited to Thriller Bark Pirates. I think it's too strong by itself that it should probably be adjusted in some way, but we'll see if Bandai kind of agrees with it. But you can kind of see that kind of thing going on. But Purple Luffy, though, I do like this deck, and I do want to actually do some more experimentation with it, mostly because we do have the Lin 9-drop, which has been a really good boss monster for this deck. The fact that we get to heal with this leader for Luffy when generally we would not be able to, and we're a deck that likes to take cards from our own life, being able to kind of like take that life with this Lin is really great. And something that I've been wanting to do, and this is a little bit off topic, but we have a lot of these Animal Kingdom pirates now standard in the deck. We have like these vanillas. We do have like the ulti page 1 combo. We have Queen, which is a great card, and then our boss monsters in both the Lin and Kaido. Which Lin also is I say this is not a Animal Kingdom Pirates, but is a Big Mom Pirates, which is important because we do have a searcher that I will claim the One Piece, which would be able to get cards from both of those. So that's definitely a card I've been considering running in this deck, in the fact that we do get more consistency into our late game pieces, which can be really nice. And then I do think Magellan has a lot of power against decks that want to get to their late curve a lot of the time. and being able to prevent that is really strong too. So Purple Luffy I'm going to probably test out a little bit more in the next couple of days, and I've been thinking this deck is it's been catching my eye a little bit more lately as well. Kalgara, alternatively, I do not like this deck playstyle wise, but I do represent, like, when this hits the curve, when you see your good pieces, when you are able to get your Noland, this deck can be really great. Being able to play out bodies like a 6/8. If you're not playing against Lucci, they're going to have a hard time removing this. A 6/8 vanilla, just keeping some attacking. Even if you're like a 6K leader, an 8K leader, 9K leader, you still get that good pressure for it too. And if you're playing against a deck that doesn't, like against Nami or something like that, where you can really be aggressive with taking cards from your own life, you get a lot of good pressure with this deck. So I've been seeing a lot of builds. There's a good amount of like options and text where I think you can have like your own personal build with this, which is still cool. And it's hard for you to play around everything in Kalgara because there's so many different cards that your opponent could be running. For example, Flame Split versus like a Maru. There's also like how many rush cards you're playing and just the whole thing. So I think this deck is creepingly getting like a little bit better, and I'm going to be interested to see how it does on a larger scale as well. Luffy, the one thing I'll say about this one, and I've been a big fan of more of an Animal Kingdom version of this package. I know a lot of people are playing the Navy build, but I do like the fact that we are seeing more people in the 9-drop Kaido with this. Jack is such an important card for us in this deck that we do kind of want to keep this find this more consistently. So if you want to run like the Queen Searcher, and then also something I've been seeing is that people are playing Laboon. So I'm actually starting to become a really big fan of this card as well. It's kind of like just a worse copy of Kuzan sometimes, but Kuzan's sometimes like the best card in our deck. So just to have like 2 backup copies of this card is fantastic. There's just also times where it's better with Moria because you can immediately get the -4 on this activate main. And then if you have Jack out already, you get rid of a 7 or less, which is pretty great. So, and then if you had Suru, it's a 9 or less, which is most things. So because of that, and since we have these activate mains that Laboon can interact with Gecko Moria, I think that's something that's really helpful for this meta too. So I do like this, and I've been experimenting with this deck a little bit more than usual. Reiju, we've been kind of seeing this deck. We're still on the Porch package. I was curious to see if this was still going to be the premier package for this deck with Red Purple Law exiting, if we needed to be like that low to the ground Dawn minus aggressive. But when we also can run Black Maria and get cards, our Dawn back, that does become pretty impactful. So I do think that's a good card for us, and it does help us too. But it is really interesting for, I don't know, like this is a deck that we can only run so much tech because we do have to run so much of the main package, but there we are for Reiju. Zoro, this is pretty much the same build that we've been seeing for this deck, being able to just be really aggressive with getting stuff off the like the Tony Chopper 3-drop, and just being able to get a wide board. If your opponent isn't a good deck for removal or playing a lot of bodies themselves, you can really swarm and overwhelm a lot of decks, especially 4-life leaders are decks like Purple Luffy that like to take cards from their life pretty easily too. So you guys have probably seen this quite a bit. I think this is it's been getting a little bit worse every week as people kind of figure out how to play against it and ways to counter it too, but I still think it's moderately good in this format as well. It just thinks that it has a bad matchup into Rob Lucci and Star Deck 14 Luffy, which is a good amount of the meta, but you do have a really good matchup into Nami, which is fantastic. We have Bonnie too, which I've been enjoying this deck a little bit more lately as well. This is running more of like the Luffy package, so this is more of like anti-Lucci and Luffy tech for that, being able to get protection. Essentially, if your opponent tries to cost reduct you. So I think Rosinante is just better in this meta in general, since we do have Carrot as well. That helps you. I'm surprised we're playing Carrot instead of Bonnie. I think both are great adds for this deck right now. You kind of like, there's sometimes where Bonnie is strictly better, especially if you want to stop them from having like a 10 Dawn turn, but I do think that this deck is still pretty viable right now. And then lastly, Katakuri. We do get the new Nami, which has been really strong for the deck. Just another way to get rid of bodies, and I still think like the 10-drop Big Mom is great, even with putting, which hasn't been seeing as much play lately, into this meta. I think that this can warp a lot of matchups and put you in a good spot. So these are all the deck lists real quick, and let's go to the updated tier list. All right, and to wrap it up, here is the last tier list that I made for this meta, kind of showing off a little bit of like the results we were looking at based on this. We still haven't had any, like, again, large tournaments, which will happen after this weekend. But these were my thoughts a couple weeks ago, and then these are my thoughts kind of now. So I have updated that the top three. I put these three up here. I think it's pretty standard that these are the three best decks in this format. Star Deck 14 Luffy is like the fourth best. I think it's pretty close to being up there, and sometimes it is better than Rob Lucci, but I think these three are just more standard in general. The biggest issue is that I think Star Deck 14 Luffy is a little bit more consistent, but at the same time I think Lucci has better extension into removal and some better plays. So that's kind of where this is at. And again, this is like the last time I'll say this. I think this kind of attributes to why people think this meta is a little bit stale, is because like it's the same three decks that we've been seeing for a long time without any major changes to them. And then we do have a lot. And I will say that I think we have a lot of decks that are just viable in general right now, though. They are a little bit weaker, which is why I did kind of want to make this top three. But tier 1, I think right now, Star Deck 14 Luffy, I think Bonnie's still there. I think Purple Luffy is still... it might jump up there. We haven't really seen it perform at a large event, but we might this weekend. Reiju has been pretty solid, and Kalgara. Maybe this one's a little bit too high, and maybe Zora's a little bit too low. But generally, like these two tiers are honestly really, really close to each other. I think a lot of these are viable, and honestly, the reason I broke it up like this too was more so just so we didn't have like a super long like tier 1 kind of thing. So I think all these leaders are viable. I also bumped up a lot of the decks in the Star Deck waiting room up to tier 1.5 based on them still performing without a lot of their full support. This means decks like Katakuri, Doflamingo. We also have Anel, Marco, Boa as well. So I think those are helpful. I think these decks might be a little bit better and not viable right now with the current meta for it without their support. Smoker in particular, Newgate. I've also been kind of turned on to some like GARP decks as well. So these can be kind of tricky, and like we do get a lot of support from the addition of the Smoker Star Deck 2, and I think also like the Newgate one, we get like just being able to put Dawn on our leader for free, I think helps out a lot. So I'm going to be interested to see if GARP does anything in the next little bit. And then we have Red Purple Luffy, kind of the same thing, being able to take advantage of the red cards as well as the purple cards from the OP05 Luffy as well. So I've moved Kaido down to tier 2. I really wanted this deck to work, but I know it's not as consistent as it should be. King's down there, Carrot, Vinsmoke, sorry, not Vinsmoke. We got Vegapunk, Tony Chopper, Sabo, Betty, Kid, Uta, Ace, and Sabo. So if I didn't mention a leader, I think is in tier 2 or lower in case you need that. And then we don't have Sanji yet, and we don't have the Law or Sakazuki. So in general, it's kind of like a weird situation where we know that these decks are reigning supreme, at least from like play to and win rate, but like there's a lot of decks I think that are viable, and it really just kind of depends on their day, on which decks they kind of face against. Kind of dictates their success a lot of the time, where I think these just have a good enough matchup spread that you kind of make it work anyways. So but that's kind of where I'm at. This is where my head's at. I'm looking forward to results this weekend. If you guys want to make sure you don't miss them, make sure to hit that like and subscribe. We're going to make videos when those results get out, and they will be updated on my website, Eggman Events, as well. So that's going to be it for us. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you all next time.